Welcome to another chapter of Kabbalah and the Bible stories. Today we're going to talk about Moses in Egypt. As a refresher, Kether is the unity or sum of all possibilities and the sum of all potential. It is the unity of a thing, the way that we view it, the ultimate light. Now, when we start talking about Moses, we actually must begin much earlier. Joseph was the one that first came to Egypt as a slave. He was taken into captivity, and while he was there, he became the second in command when he suggested to Pharaoh that they store up grains for a coming famine that Pharaoh had dreamed about. And because Joseph had worked such great things in Egypt and had saved the people from starvation through his insightful planning, Pharaoh invited all of Israel to come down and live amongst the Egyptians as one people. They were given the best land, the land of Goshen, and they were allowed to bring in all of their livestock and children. There were 70 people who came down to Egypt to live, and that included all 12 of the brothers, the sons of Israel, and Israel himself. The next level of the story is above and below, and we know that that's when we characterize or separate out the two. This happened when the old Pharaoh died, and Ramses, his son, became the new Pharaoh, and he saw Israel as a threat and began to enslave them. In this case, Egypt is above and Israel is below. But we have to ask ourselves, why is that? Why did Jehovah allow that to happen? Isn't Israel the selected one, the special one? How did Israel wind up below Egypt? Well, there are several reasons for that. And we're going to go over what it is that makes the ideal state in Kether. What is it that God is looking for? Because whatever it is he's trying to accomplish in Kether, that highest potential that we can be, determines what is above and what is below. And what we need to learn is, what is it that God is looking at to determine that? Well, part of the reason that Israel winds up being below Egypt, it has to do with something Joseph did back when he was saving Egypt from the famine. Now, normally when we think of the Bible characters, we think of them in perfect terms. We see them as being sinless, when really none of them were. They made mistakes. And Joseph made a big mistake. One of the things he did when he took up the grains during the years of plenty is that he stored them up, and then when the famine came, instead of doling them back out to the people who had grown it in the first place, he made them buy it. Now, since they were unable to grow new things and had nothing to sell themselves, the only thing they could do is take things that they had already gathered up during the years and sell that. And so most of them wound up selling everything that they had, all of their cattle, and in the midst of that, the famine was still going on. And so they wound up having to sell their own selves, their land, and their own selves into slavery. And so what happened is Joseph caused all of Egypt to become enslaved to Pharaoh. Now we get to the grouping by kind. And we see that we're starting off here with Pharaoh looking at Israel as being a threat. And so he makes this edict that he wants the midwives to do. He wants them to, when the Hebrew women are having babies, to go in and kill the male children. If it's a male, it dies. If it's a female, it lives. And the midwives are kind of iffy about that. They don't want to kill innocent children. And so they go back and they lie to Pharaoh, and they tell Pharaoh hey, these women they're way better than we are. I mean, they are having these babies so fast that by the time we get there, there's nothing we can do. Now, normally we would think, wow, they lied. This is evil. They have transgressed the law, and therefore they should be punished. But we see in this story that they're actually praised. God praises them for lying. Why is that? Well, normally when we think about transgressing the law, we think that the person is evil. But in the Kabbalah model, something else is going on. Instead of judging the person, God needs to find out, where is the wickedness really coming from? Is it coming from the heart of the person, or is it coming from the structure that they're living under? And so in the case of these midwives, the wickedness is coming from Pharaoh. Pharaoh has put fear in them. And so they're between a rock and a hard place. Either they're going to kill these innocent children, which they don't want to do, or they're going to lie to Pharaoh, and so that they don't have to do this killing. And so because the wickedness isn't really coming from the heart of the midwives, it's coming from Pharaoh, he puts the blame where the blame should be put. It is put on the structure, the government that caused them to lie. Okay? And so when Pharaoh sees that he's not getting anywhere with these midwives, he decides to put out a new edict that all the children, all the male children, are to be dumped into the Nile and killed. Well, Moses' mom decides she's not going to do that. She makes a basket, and she keeps the rule of putting her child in the Nile, but she makes a basket for him to float in. And she sends her daughter to watch her young baby brother float along the Nile. And of course, the Pharaoh's own daughter finds Moses in this basket. Now, when the princess finds Moses, she sees the young girl and she tells her to go find a nursemaid. And of course, the young girl brings back the mother of Moses. And Moses is brought up for a short time as a Hebrew under his own mom. But after that, he's raised by the Pharaoh's wife. And the question arises, what will Moses become? Will he be grouped as an Egyptian, or will he be a Hebrew? And that goes with the grouping by kind. Is he a Hebrew, or is he an Egyptian? And that question is answered in Tephereth, the kingdom. Moses sees one of his brothers being mistreated by an Egyptian, and he kills the Egyptian. In his heart, he sees the injustice, and he identifies with his Hebrew brethren. He identifies with the suffering of the servants, the slaves. And so he is forever a Hebrew. Now comes the line of judgment. And Pharaoh sees, or he hears about this death, and Moses knows that what he has done is known, and so he flees to Midian. The question we have here again is, Moses has committed murder. Isn't he then looked at as an evil, wicked guy? And again, the answer is no, he's not, because his murder, his action of murdering was based on this wicked structure that he was under, that he saw being imposed on the Jewish people. And so he did something about it. Now, granted, we have other methods now that we can think about, like, Gandhi and Martin Luther King, doing the nonviolent march. But this is something that Moses did. He goes to Midian and he meets Jehovah face to face, and he sees the burning bush, and Jehovah gives him the commandment to go back to Egypt and free Israel. And that's exactly what Moses does. So the end result here, the final state that we find, is that Moses returns to Egypt and eventually frees the Israelites from Egypt. And that final state is what is important, because that becomes the starting point of the next part of this story. The Kabbalah is iterative. It goes around in a circle. So what started with Joseph, what ended with Joseph, that state, is the start of Moses' story. And the end of this resultant, when he meets Jehovah, is the beginning of his return into Egypt. And that's where we will pick it up next time, when Moses returns to Egypt.